If we want to become more kind, we don't magically become kind first and then start performing kind acts. We instead start with the acts, and through the process of performing the kind acts, we become more kind. The same is with courage, justice, temperance, and all the other virtues or positive character traits. But it can be tricky to know the right amount of kindness, courage, or justice in any situation. And that's where Aristotle's Doctrine of the Mean comes in, a framework for living well that's just as useful now as it was 2,000 years ago. In this video, we'll explore what it is and how understanding it can improve how we live today. Let's get into it. Alright, so I've got a PDF version of the Nicomachean Ethics pulled up here. This is the W.D. Ross translation. And before we get into it, I want to give a quick overview of what the book is about. So here Aristotle is exploring how to live a happy life. And of course, an important aspect of living a happy life is acting well and performing right action. And that's what book 2 is all about. So let's get into it. He begins book 2 by saying that we get the virtues by exercising them. So just as men become builders by building and musicians by playing their instrument, so too men become just by doing just acts, temperate by doing temperate acts, and brave by doing brave acts. And these are just several examples of what Aristotle would call the virtues. In the Ethics, he gives us a total of 12. These are things like courage, temperance, liberality, patience, truthfulness, friendliness. This is not a complete list of the moral virtues. There are many more virtues, but this is sort of just a sample set that he gives us to help us understand what he means when he's referencing moral virtues. And I'll digress here for a moment to point out that what Aristotle is saying here is so simple, but I think it's so powerful at the same time. Because what he's saying is that if we want to become the type of person that has any of these traits, more courageous, more truthfulness, let's say we want to be more friendly, we don't obtain it by simply wishing for it and thinking about it. He says we obtain it by performing the actions that align with this positive character trait. So in the example of friendliness, we become more friendly by acting more friendly. Again, not just by wishing for it and understanding what friendliness is, but by actually doing it. And that leads into Aristotle's next point, which is that his present inquiry does not aim at theoretical knowledge, but rather it's concerned with how we ought to do them. It's concerned with action. And this is also important because I think philosophy can get a bad rap sometimes about being too much about thought and contemplating and not enough about action. But Aristotle makes it clear that he is concerned here with action. And he next starts with examining what these moral virtues are, how we can define them, and how we can understand them so then that we can go and act properly. He writes, "It is the nature of such things to be destroyed by defect and excess." So in the example of courage, he writes, "For the man who flies from and fears everything and does not stand his ground becomes a coward. But at the same time, the man who fears nothing but goes to meet every danger becomes rash." The same is with pleasure. If you indulge too much, you can become self-indulgent, while not enough, you become insensible. So these two virtues, these positive character traits, are destroyed by excess and defect, but they're preserved by the mean. Further analogy he gives to help us understand is that of artwork. Just let's say we see a beautiful painting, we can say of it that it is not possible either to take away or to add anything, implying that excess and defect destroy the goodness of works of art, while the mean preserves it. And so Aristotle takes this principle that the excess and the defect is bad, but the mean is good, and he applies it to the moral virtues. So again, in the example that we just discussed, with the virtue of courage, the excess is rashness, the deficiency is cowardice. The same can be said with all of the other positive virtues. Good temperedness. Too much temper, you're a hothead. Too little, you have no spirit. Same with wittiness. Too much wittiness, you come off as a buffoon. Too little, you're boring. With friendliness, it's possible to be too friendly. In this case, you're obsequious, or you're not friendly enough and you're quarrelsome. And again, this is not a complete list of moral virtues. There are many more that we can probably think of and identify in our own lives today. Two that I've thought of to add on are, for example, prudence in speech, where it's possible to be too blunt. It's also possible to be too evasive and not telling people what we really think. The mean is right in the middle. The same with giving attention. We give too much attention to somebody, we can perhaps be intrusive, but not enough, and we're neglecting them. And so this is important for understanding how we can perform good character traits in the right way and in the right amount. And that's what Aristotle says is necessary to do. He says to feel these traits at the right times with reference to the right objects, towards the right people, with the right motive, and in the right way is what is both intermediate and best. And on the flip side, not everything admits of a mean. So if something is bad in and of itself, such as feelings of spite, shamelessness, envy, or actions like adultery, theft, and murder, these are always bad. There's no way to do these things in the sort of the right amount. For example, there's no such thing as committing adultery with the right woman at the right time and in the right way. To simply do it at all is always wrong. And so things that are bad must simply be avoided, but the things that are good need to be done in the right amount, at the right time, to the right person, and so forth. This sounds difficult. It's because it is. And Aristotle acknowledges that. He concludes the chapter with saying that it is no easy task to be good. For in everything, it is no easy task to find the middle. Anyone can get angry. That is easy, to give or spend money. But to do this to the right person, to the right extent, at the right time, with the right motive, and in the right way, is not for everyone. Therefore, goodness is both rare and laudable and noble. But despite the difficulty involved with acting rightly and performing these positive moral virtues, I think Aristotle's framework at least helps us to take a step in the right direction, in that it helps us to understand what is the right amount of the action. I think in modern lingo, it's the equivalent of having feel. Understanding this framework can help us to have feel. And then my second major takeaway is that it's not enough to simply understand what is the right action. The second thing we need to do is actually to go and do it, perform the action. And through performing the action, we attain that positive character trait and become that better version of ourselves that we maybe want to become. And I think this can be applied not only to positive character traits, but also to external goods and goals that we have for ourselves. For example, let's say we want to become more intelligent, or we want to make more money, be better looking. What Aristotle is saying is that we need to perform the actions that align with and result in those positive outcomes. And so, for example, if we want to be more intelligent, we need to perform actions that result in more intelligence. These would be things such as reading more books, or listening to podcasts, surrounding ourselves with intelligent people, and so forth. If we want to make more money, performing actions that result in us making more money. So networking, working harder, working smarter. Same with better looking, exercising more, locking down our diet, improving our wardrobe, and so forth. So whether it's a positive character trait that we want to attain and sort of change our actions to align with who that person is that we want to be and that trait that we want, or whether it's an external goal or a good that we want, the key is to simply start performing actions in the here and now that align with those positive character traits or external goals or goods. And it sort of reminds me of the fake it till you make it mantra, but in some sense, like, it's not faking it. If we're going after these things and we're performing the actions that align with these things, then that's simply us putting forth our best effort to achieve them. And to me, there's nothing fake about that. But yeah, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. The goal of this channel is to study the great philosophical works and take what we can learn from them and apply them to our own lives today to live better, happier, and clearer lives. If that's something you're interested in, then make sure to subscribe so that you can follow along and catch future episodes. And I hope to see you in the next one.